The morning of April the 16th, 2003 started like any other for Air Force Colonel Philip Shue. He woke up and made a coffee, bringing a cup up to his wife who was still in bed. The pair chatted and he kissed her goodbye, telling her he loved her as he walked out the door to head to work. Those were the last words she would hear. 2 hours later, Shue would be found deceased, involved in a terrible car accident. But what happened that morning would leave many questioning and speculating for years to come. This would be no standard traffic incident. The pair first met 15 years earlier in 1988, when Tracy, then an Air Force nurse, was assigned to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. Tracy and Phil, a psychiatrist, soon fell for each other and began dating. At the time, Phil was separated from his wife, and the pair were going through a difficult divorce. It would be in 1993 when the divorce would be finalised, and that was when Phil and Tracy decided to marry. In 1998, Phil was reassigned to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. He and Tracy bought a house in nearby Bourne. Tracy, who was born and raised in New York, would describe how Phil had such a passion for life, someone who enjoyed the simple things. Born on the 22nd of July 1948 and raised in Brookville, Ohio, Phil had that Midwestern, very low-key, soft-spoken, mild-mannered, very laid-back attitude. In 1970, Phil graduated from the University of Wisconsin and immediately entered the United States Air Force. In 1980, he was accepted into the medical school at Wright State University. Upon completion of medical school in 1984, he was accepted into a 4-year psychiatric residency program at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Medical Center in Dayton, Ohio. Phil would go on to have a distinguished career in various aspects of the Air Force and gained specialized military education in critical incident stress management, hostage negotiation, wilderness medicine, global medicine, land survival training, water survival training, and Arctic survival training. He would later go on to be the Deputy Chief of Aerospace Medicine, and in 1994 Colonel Shue was awarded the Air Force Achievement Medal for Leadership. In 1995, Colonel Shue was awarded the Air Force Commendation Medal following deployment with NATO forces to Bosnia and Croatia during Operation Enduring Freedom. During Operation Desert Shield, Colonel Shue deployed on multiple missions with flying squadrons and task forces to the Gulf, where he served as Chief Medical Officer and Flight Surgeon. While assigned at Travis, he was selected to take part in or lead multiple aircraft mishap investigations, critical incident stress management teams, health service inspections, congressional inquiries, hostage negotiation teams, and investigations for the Office of the Air Force Inspector General. It was during his illustrious career that Phil Shue met his first wife, Nancy. Phil and Nancy Shue's 20-year marriage ended in 1992. The relationship did not end on happy terms. In fact, it ended in a bitter settlement battle. Nancy received the right to own insurance policies on Phil's life worth almost $1 million. Phil didn't talk a lot about his first wife, according to Tracy, other than to say there was not any love in the marriage. Phil and Tracy seemed extremely happy though in their relationship. Come 2003, the pair were planning their long-term future. Phil and Tracy had already found their dream home in Alabama, a big place with a pond in the back. For the pair, this was a new chapter in their life. The future seemed to be bright, and Phil was also planning his retirement. It appeared he was ready to settle down and enjoy life. However, it was just one day after putting down a deposit on the house that the incident occurred. Prior to that fateful day, there were some issues in Phil's life. Phil Shue claimed to have been warned by anonymous letters that ex-wife Nancy Shue was plotting to kill him to collect on the life insurance policies. Tracy Shue described Phil Shue as terrified by the letters. One letter, supposedly sent by a friend, read the following: "Dear Dr. Shue, please read this letter. You may be in danger. I'm writing because I remember you as such a kind and caring doctor, and I can't just sit by and not help you by telling you what I know. I'll try to keep it short so you're certain to read it. A friend of mine who worked with your ex-wife's husband told me some scary things. My friend told me they wish you were dead so they could collect life insurance. I don't understand why they would have life insurance on you, but that's what my friend told me. My friend thinks they may actually be planning something. I don't know if they would actually hurt you, but please be careful. I had to write. If I didn't, I couldn't bear the thought of something bad happening to you that I could have prevented by telling you what I heard. If I hear anything more specific, I will let you know. Please be careful. I'm sorry to worry you, but I just couldn't not write and find out later that I could have stopped a bad thing from happening." The last message Colonel Shue received from the anonymous friend was this short and cryptic note: "The plan is now delayed, but not cancelled. Be careful. I can't identify myself because they may find out and stop letting information slip." The letters Philip were receiving were typed on a typewriter and unsigned, but they left Phil extremely fearful for his life. Phil tried cancelling the policy, but the insurance company told him he couldn't. They told him that she owned the policy, and therefore she had total authority over that policy. They could not cancel it. Phil feared for his life, even explaining to the insurance company that the longer he lives, the more tempting it becomes for them to act on their plans for my murder, and that fear never left him. He didn't know what to do. He felt that he had tried everything, every avenue to try and address this, including his ex-wife, and it was a brick wall. He couldn't control it. In an ominous prediction, he contacted them again, asking them to thoroughly examine his death for evidence of foul play, even if on the surface it appeared accidental. On that morning of April the 16th, 2003, nothing seemed out of the normal. Phil was planning on getting to the office early to do a couple of hours of paperwork. 2 hours after leaving his house, his vehicle struck some trees alongside a Texas interstate highway not far from San Antonio. The car was completely caved in on the driver's side, and Shue suffered major head trauma. As a result, it's likely he was killed instantly. Investigators would be quick to attend the scene. It was a tragic case, but something investigators will have seen plenty of times before. Traffic accidents, as unfortunate as they are common. But there would be nothing standard about this one. Pretty quickly, law enforcement knew that this was more than a car crash. Emergency responders found strands of duct tape hanging from Shue's ankles and wrists. Both wrists were wrapped with duct tape in a similar way, suggesting he'd been bound earlier. Further investigation showed his nipples had been cut off, and a 6-inch surgical slice had been made down the centre of his chest. He was also missing part of a finger. Investigators would find an anaesthetic called lidocaine in Shue's system, something which would lead investigators to be even more baffled by the scenario. The cause of death was lethal head injuries, caused by the impact of the crash. Witnesses would come forward to describe how they witnessed the vehicle driving erratically before veering off the road. The investigation would take almost a year. At the end of the investigation, which involved numerous agencies including the local and state police, even the Air Force, would come to the same conclusion. Philip Shue had ended his own life that day, a result of his own bizarre psychological breakdown, a conclusion that multiple people around him would strongly disagree with. In the spring of 2005, the Colonel was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honours. His widow Tracy leaving a single white rose on his casket in his memory. But for her and his family, the decision that investigators came to just didn't make logical sense. Of the duct tape on her husband's wrists and ankles, the missing nipples, and the gash in his chest, Tracy says she believes that Phil had been abducted and managed to escape his abductors. What other explanation could there be? But the chief medical examiner believes the injuries found on Shue's chest are self-inflicted. Another strange fact was the lidocaine in his system. If another person did this to him, why inject a pain reliever into his system? Investigators also pointed out to the fact that if he had been abducted and broke free, why not go to either the police or a hospital? But he was driving away from San Antonio and the hospitals. He passed 3 of the exits to his own town and had a working cell phone, so why not call anyone? For these reasons, law enforcement don't believe his actions are consistent with someone fleeing an assailant. But there were many others like Tracy who also strongly disagreed with the outcome. Another doctor who conducted a second autopsy raised serious concerns, pointing out no injection site was identified by the pathologist in the original autopsy, and also the levels of lidocaine were so low for Shue to numb himself from the pain. Regarding the duct tape, absolutely no fingerprints were found, suggesting someone used gloves, and again no gloves were found at the scene, nor was any other evidence found at the scene. Another point was the letters. It appeared Shue was actually being warned that someone was preparing to end his life to collect on his life insurance. If you put the letters together with the manner of his death, how could you possibly not consider this was an attempt to follow through on the threats, which eventually, albeit with a few hiccups, worked? However, there are questions regarding the letters. His ex-wife Nancy even believing Shue might have fabricated the warning letters himself. But the most damaging piece of evidence in the family's quest for the truth was a 20-plus page psychological autopsy that the military issued. Produced 2 years after his death, it concludes that Colonel Phil Shue had become depressed, irrational and even paranoid in the months before he died. The report again questions whether the warning letters were real, and finds no evidence of another person being involved in Colonel Shue's death. But again, the other side of the coin was that Phil was slightly paranoid, something his loved ones agree with. He was paranoid and on edge because he was being warned his life was in danger, and wouldn't you be in that scenario? As the years have passed, there appears to be no change in the outcome of the case. Tracy has never wavered in her belief that her husband was murdered that morning. The findings of his death did not affect the payment of his life insurance benefits. His first wife Nancy received $1 million. Tracy received almost $2 million. But as to what happened that day, many people in both law enforcement and the medical field have completely different opinions, with some believing the only possible answer is abduction, in which Shue likely escaped, only to crash his vehicle while doing so, and others believing this was all a staged scene. In a complex case, both sides can argue there is evidence pointing to one scenario, and evidence pointing against one scenario. No law enforcement agency has ever named Nancy Shue or her husband as a suspect or as a person of interest in the case. And as far as I can see, the initial ruling remains. As of 2025, Philip Michael Shue's case appears to be closed.